Audio Jungle.
I am the Divine Prince, Ty Emmecca, Pan-African Spiritualist, Practitioner, Author, Advisor, Elagoon, Oloye, Hoodoo, Obeya, Bokur. I reside in this beautiful and legendary, historic Treme, New Orleans, Louisiana. So join me as I share food, music, culture, tradition, the rhythms and the flavor of New Orleans voodoo. Respect the voodoo.
Nothing beats a Jet 2 holiday. And right now, you can save £50 per person.
Even though most Jamaicans today profess themselves as Christians, even up until the early 1900s, this wasn't the case. As I mentioned before in previous videos, the passing of the Obia Acts of 1760 had a multitude of effects. One has to bear in mind and to understand that before 1760, only white plantation owners were Christians. No West African person was a Christian. This is because even though West Africans had many things taken away from them when they got here, first of all their freedoms, they were allowed to continue, for the most part, their religious practices. This of course changed when the British found themselves being defeated over and over again by our ancestors, and they wondered how this was happening because they had all the tools. It was communicated to them by the Maroons, with whom they had a pact from 1730, that Taki and his followers were using West African spirituality. Let me correct that, West African spiritualities and religions, because remember, West Africa is a huge region, and we came from what is now known as Nigeria, Ghana, but broken down into groups like Yoruba, Igbo, Akan. So all of these multitudes of religions were what were used by Taki and his followers to escape, to plant traps, and also to make weapons. Now, even though the Maroons still continue to practice their religions, it was kind of interfered with by a section in the Pacification Act between them and the British in 1730 that required two colonizers or two British men to live among their communities. Now, after the passing of the 1760 Obia laws, even though the British and the Maroons were kind of in cahoots, you could understand how the Maroons would have watered down their religions, and they would have become more influenced by Christianity more faster than the others. Similarly, with the passing of the 1760 Obia laws, which was basically a law to prevent West Africans from practicing whatever religions they were, not just Obia, there were a multitude of religions. The church would send men out to rural communities accompanied by Maroon warriors to ensure that people weren't practicing those religions and they had started to assimilate with Christianity. But of course, they couldn't monitor everyone, and of course, this continued in silence. But the place where this flourished the most was in a parish called St. Thomas. The ironic thing about St. Thomas having a bad name for what it practices is that that was a safe space for many of our West African ancestors to practice their religions, their spiritualities, everything. And one of the reasons why this flourished in St. Thomas was because indentured workers, quote unquote, from what is now known as Congo came there in the mid-1800s, and they had come after the Obia Act had passed. So while people from St. Thomas were already practicing what they were practicing, we had an addition, people from Congo bringing other mysticism and art forms which were more similar to what Haiti practices now than Christianity itself. A matter of fact, if you do a DNA test per se between Haiti and St. Thomas, you'd realize that there are people who are related over just a few generations. This explains, and it's a good thing, why Kumina and things like those, they kind of are more pervasive in the eastern part of Jamaica, predominantly St. Thomas and even in St. Catherine and some parts of Portland. And this is where the term Meago St. Thomas Fio come from. Even though we consider Meago St. Thomas Fio as a very evil thing, most of our enslaved ancestors, that's where they go for medicinal, because back in those times, you know, our ancestors didn't have access to healthcare. So that's where they went for medical issues, spiritual advice, and anything you'd want help with, because St. Thomas was a connector to the homeland. So this is why there were so many rebellions in the East, and also why Paul Bogle, even though dressed as a Christian pastor or whatever, was still involved in the practicing of West African religions. Now, as we got more successful and we had more rebellions and we flourished, the British passed more and more laws that prevented us from gathering together and from worshipping in our little spaces. And this is how some West African ancestors tried to hide it by pretending that they were actually inside the church. To be honest, over time, being pressured by Christianity, many of them kind of either merged it with West African spiritualities and religions, or it happened unconsciously. The other irony of how things like Bedouadism and Pocomania get a bad rap is because these are the remnants of what our ancestors practiced mixed with Christianity. So Rapid Church and Poco Church aren't evil. They're literally just trying to survive by merging both sides together. And these multitudes of religions and spiritualities mixed all over continued throughout the 1800s, to the late 1800s. Another thing I'll do in the next video is to express how Jamaica was a multilingual place in the 1800s, considering the fact where everyone came from. So it was multi-religious and multilingual. It was the late 1800s and the 1900s where there were more persecution for people practicing Obia and other religions, where a lot of our ancestors just said them can't bother. Just to save the lives of their children and grandchildren, they eventually moved into the church. After a while, they were convinced that these were evil practices, but even while being convinced that they were evil, they still held on to the parts of the religion, some of them that dealt with healing through bush and all kind of bush medicine. So if you hear people call for the repeal of the Obia Act, they aren't calling for Jamaica to be thrown in the midst of hell and evil. They're calling for the repeal of something that was formed based on blatant racism. And I'm not here telling anyone who to worship or what to believe, but I believe, as a descendant of these people, that their stories deserve to be told, and to try to erase some of this narrative that goes around that our ancestors were evil because of what they practiced. So in conclusion, it wasn't just religious, the passing of the 1760 Obia Act. By preventing a group of people from fraternizing, from communicating, you erase traditions that have existed long before your traditions. West African traditions have been around for thousands of years, but by preventing people from talking, from speaking in their language, practicing their religions and their culture, you erase a big part of who they are. Because what we know today is just a fraction of who we truly were and are. I cannot end this video without saying that I go through the same things that my ancestors went through, because every time I do one of these videos, whether it's on the comment section or in my DMs, there's someone telling me of how I'm going to hell, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. The difference is that my ancestors were forced into Christianity, but I am someone who grew up as a Christian and learned all of this and decided that I had to do some research. So even if you don't plan to convert or whatever, I think it is important that all of us learn something. It adds humanity to where we are coming from. And if we believe in our ancestors looking at us, what would they think about us if they realize that the things that they fought against, we are doing them? And of course, we're not going to change our religion, but even if they understand that you can't change your religion, I don't think they would understand you not giving them the dignity and justice they deserve. After all, we're here because of them. Big up.
We hid it in the church, Psalms by day, roots by night. We shouted on Sunday, then buried a jar by the fig tree Monday morning. That was the balance.
Honor and respect, honor and respect, honor and respect. It is another edition of Revolutionary Hoodoo, New Orleans Voodoo Secrets and Recipes. Voodoo Hoodoo 101, powered, produced, promoted, sponsored, and supported by NOIVD, New Orleans International Voodoo Day. Please continue to visit us at www.vodouday.org, voodooday.org for more information. And Elder Reggie will certainly continue to bring updates about cultural events that you can participate in now, as well as April 23rd and 24th, 2026. I want to pick up where we left off on yesterday in our discussion of conjure magic and power and the influence of the Afro-Atlantic religious practices on slave resistance. We certainly discussed the similarities between the uprising in New York City with the uprising in Jamaica. We discussed the power in a name, what's in a name, and the power of utilizing traditional Aboriginal, Indigenous languages and names that open portals and release energy. And in addition to those 9 rebels we discussed on yesterday with obvious Akan day names, a young male slave by the name of Dick, owned by Harmanus Berger, performed a vital function during the course of the trials. Having been charged in the coroner's inquest with the murder of Henry Brazier on April 9th, 1712, Dick, along with Peter Van Tilborough Kofi, received immunity in return for services provided to the British Crown. Serving as an interpreter for the slaves who could not speak English on several dates, including April 11th, 12th, 14th, 16th, 17th, May 7th, May 27th, and June 4th, Dick's skills in that regard were drawn on in at least 7 of the 9 cases involving slaves with Akan day names. Jos Linson's Kwaku, who was charged on the same day as Dick, and Ventilborough's Kofi, who also became a witness for the British Crown, were the only Africans with Akan day names not requiring Dick's services in their cases. Quite obviously, then, Dick too was an Akan-speaking enslaved African. And with so many links to Akan culture in New York City at the time of this uprising, it is entirely conceivable that Peter the Doctor, the African-born conjurer who inspired the rebellion, was an Akan Obeah man. Obeah conjures, or OB, would later inspire rebellions throughout the British, Dutch, and Danish American colonial possessions, including important revolts in Jamaica in 1733, 1738, and 1760, in Antigua in 1736, and Berbice in 1763. No less than 20 rebellions in the Americas were attributed to Akan speakers in locations including Dutch Guyana, the Virgin Islands, Barbados, and based on the above findings, colonial New York City as well. A sizable number of these Akan slave revolts were intertwined with the practice of obia. The word obia likely derives from the Akan word obayifo, which denotes witchcraft and sorcery in the Akan spiritual universe. The fo suffix is added to all proper names in the Akan family of languages. By dropping the suffix, the resulting word is obeyi, which was linguistically and phonetically transformed into obia, obi, obia, throughout the Americas. And as practiced in the Atlantic world, obia often served as an important epithet to slave resistance for a variety of reasons. Like their Gold Coast Obeifu counterparts, obia conjurers in the Americas use supernatural forces to bring about desired effects and actions. The desired outcome of their incantations and charms could be either positive or negative, depending on the specific scenario in which an obia man or obia woman was employed. Similarly, Akan spiritualist and Obaifo often employed aduru, or a medicine in the form of liquid or powder in their practice. Based on the expected outcome, aduru is characterized as benevolent medicine, aduru pa, benevolent medicine, adu bone, or poison, aduto. The powders used by both Peter, the doctor in New York City, and the Jamaican obia doctors would be characterized as aduru pa because they were created for the positive outcome of protecting rebellious slaves from evil agents and increasing the likelihood of success in those revolutionary moments. Powders and other forms of benevolent aduru function because of the spiritual power they naturally contain. The plants, herbs, human blood, graveyard dirt, and other substances that constitute the powder all contain an innate amount of supernatural force, which under the proper preparations proved to be quite potent in the hands of obia conjurers. Although obia served as a powerful inducement to slave resistance in areas with high concentrations of Akan speakers, the Yoruba spiritual system, known as Ifa, and its various Western Hemisphere derivatives, Voodoo, Santeria, Candomblé, would play a similar role in other regions of the Americas. During the initial phases of the 1791 Santo Domingo slave uprising, for example, an individual known as Bokman Duty, a Voodoo high priest, was the initial leader who masterminded the revolutionary movement. Bokman had considerable influence among the slaves, serving as both a religious figure and the head man of a plantation. The plan he initiated was on a massive scale, involving hundreds, if not thousands, of enslaved. The insurgents would set fire to plantations in the outskirts of the province of Le Cap and kill all whites within the town. On the night of August 22nd, 1791, the rebels organized in the mountain range adjacent to Le Cap. It was here that Bookman gave final instructions and made voodoo incantations while drinking the blood of a sacrificed black pig. And although Bookman was to be captured and executed early in the revolt, his actions gave the necessary momentum and impetus to a movement that culminated in the only successful slave revolt in the history of the Americas. And before I turn it over to my co-host, this indeed had great effects on the Black code here in the South, how we are treated, how we were confined, how our movements, our means of communications were curtailed, albeit outside of Congo Square. For certainly here in Orleans Parish, we were allowed to gather on Sundays in the afternoons in Congo Square, and not only maintain our beat and our rhythms and our tongues and our language, but also create crops, little known fact, herbs, fruit, vegetables, creating the vending force that still exists within our communities today. The watermelon man, the praline lady, etc., were all birthed out of that Sunday afternoon activity in Congo Square. But the fear of Obia, of Haitian voodoo, of witchcraft in the hands of Black people has everything to do with the uh, uh, degree of brutality and control we experience here in the Deep South. And I want to thank everyone for being present, for showing up and listening and participating and digesting these words within these podcasts. Thank you so much, Nina Lloyd and Ray Alexander, for your presence here today. I want to bring in Queen Mother, Sister Toni Val Martinez, and our Elder Reggie Green Soap here on this platform. What say you, beloveds? Greetings and salutations.
Greetings. Hello, everyone in the listening area. Thank you for joining us. When I was listening to the video and listening to you, Divine Prince, what I kept, my focus was on how when your oppressor is afraid, you can't gather. You can't gather. And that still comes true today. And it was even a time right after the revolution that even in New Orleans, they forbid them to gather in Congo Square for a little while until that kind of shifted, until they made them believe it was more of a religious gathering and coming up with some ideas to make them think it was religious and everybody was welcome. It wasn't just slaves. But they do that today. When they get afraid, they call it curfew now. We got a curfew. Nobody can move. Nobody could gather. Nobody can come out. Nobody can be out. They call it curfew. And basically, that let me know when they're afraid. Now, they're afraid of different things when they call curfews for certain reasons. Like now, they're mostly afraid of looting and shooting and stuff like that. But if you think about it, that was being done in a revolution. They was tearing stuff up too. So, they have that same mindset of it. And if they thought by keeping us apart that would diminish our power, I don't think that was true. Because you had conjurers that works alone and can manifest stuff when nobody else was around and knew exactly where to aim it at. But that was their thinking, that together all the energy, our energy, like the guy say, where we are now as a people, we just a drop in the bucket of what we used to be in strength and in supernatural. Earth crisis, they sing the reggae song about we lost the powers that we had because we went and assimilated to a certain degree, assimilated totally. What say you, Elder Reggie?
Hey, blessings. Can everyone hear me? Blessing, Sister
Yeah.
Toni, Divine Prince, and the collective audience in the chat room. Beautiful reading passage by Divine Prince. Once again, I'm not that versed in Jamaica stuff, but I make a parallel to Louisiana. Now, when you go to Congo Square, from the research I've done, Congo Square was named Congo Square due to the contingency of people that was here from the Congo region of what we call Central Africa. And there they had the Simbi spirits, they worked with the Nkisis, the Mikisis, and some of those energies, the juju bag, the hand, a lot of that came out of the Congo region. And so it seemed no matter what part of Africa and captured people, which we call slaves, came to the New World, these Europeans was afraid of them. And what they did do, I believe, use other Africans against each other. So if one Africa had a powerful juju, the Europeans befriended him and almost used him as an ally against the rest of the people, or to counteract another powerful conjurer guy, just to keep the people from rebelling. And that's how I kind of see it.
And they're still doing it today.
Mm-hmm.
They're using us against our own.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of what we said yesterday about CONTELPRO.
That's right.
They recruited other blacks to go in as spies amongst the Panthers, amongst SNCC, whoever the people was, the Native American groups. They recruited one of them because it's always somebody that will turn for money.
All the time. Like,
And they knew this, even with Jesus, 40 pieces of silver, Judas turned on him. That's been their main thing, money.
Yes, yes.
You know, so even years later, well, after he died, the photographer for Martin Luther King, who traveled with him and documented his services, his marches, his jail for years, with this man in his hotel room, in his home, with his family, like a friend, found out he was an informer.
Yes. Not to change the topic, but speaking of him, when you go to the Lorraine Hotel in Memphis, Tennessee, there's a famed picture there. He's there, him and Jesse Jackson, and they saw the subverting or pointing in a different direction. So that's what the tour guide told me.
Yeah.
And so you're right what you're saying, how people could be with you, but really working against you at the same time.
Yeah. And it's sad that we don't really find out about it until after that person is dead. We don't find out how they distorted history and use people to manipulate us, really.
Mm-hmm.
To do what they wanted to do. Like I always say, and I get a lot of flack for it, but the civil rights movement was the worst thing that happened to us as a people. Because ever since then, we ain't on the damn thing. We make our money before the civil rights movement, and it went back into our black community until our black community was getting as large and powerful money-wise and land-wise as the white man. And he couldn't let that happen. He had to come up with an idea to get that green dollar out of our black hand back into his white hand where it came from in the first place. And everything went downhill after that.
I see your point. Yeah.
You know, my mama taught me about the civil rights movement as a child. And the way she did it was with a pitcher of water and a glass of water. And she poured the water out the pitcher into the glass. And we black people were the glass, and the pitcher was white people, and the money was the water. And she kept pouring it, and the glass kept filling up, and the glass started overflowing, and the pitcher was getting empty. And pretty soon, if you wanted some water in that pitcher, you was going to have to pour it back from the glass into the pitcher. So that meant if things kept going the way they were going, eventually white people would have to come to us to borrow money, to buy land. And they could not let that happen. So up pops the civil rights movement. And they used and had it infiltrated. All the pro-black organizations was infiltrated. They destroyed the Black Panthers.
Yeah.
But the Klan still exists.
Yeah. But Sister Toni, right quick with the civil rights, because of this marker in the research I've been doing around the marker, and I dub it as the first civil rights march in America, where these marchers was killed. And the premise behind them was, okay, you emancipated us, we need citizenship, and with citizenship come inalienable rights. And these rights is rights to vote, rights to own property. I believe those rights was fought for and needed so people could feel whole and complete. I don't think you were supposed to stop doing for self once you gained those rights. But for some reason, right after the civil rights, and especially in the 1960s ended, the United States government under Lyndon B. Johnson rushed in what we call the welfare state. And I think that's where some of the problem came in at, not necessarily civil rights. But that's just my point of view on it, because I think with rights and moving forward and standing on your own 2 feet, as they say, you can still accomplish a lot.
Yeah, we was doing that before the civil rights movement, standing on our own 2 feet. We had everything white world had.
No, I have to push back a little bit on that, because there were just some things that Black people and Native Americans and people of color was just X'd out on.
Like what?
It was supposed to be separate but equal, but it was not equal. It was separate, but it was not equal. It was inadequate movie theaters, inadequate stores, inadequate food on the shelves, inadequate bus service, train service. It just was
not from my studying of history. We started our own bus stations that went in our town because white people wouldn't come in our town for the most part. We started the first ambulance service that was made up off of what we was doing. We ate, we had, and the only thing that we didn't really had is what the white man thought he was giving us. We had our own theaters that was not inadequate. It was separate. We had money. We had our own restaurants. We had our own juke joints. We had our own nightclubs. We had our own clubs, just clubs, Black clubs, the coming outs and all of that. So the only thing I saw that, we didn't have that they had was nothing. We didn't eat their food. We didn't listen to their music. We didn't dress like them naturally. So why did we want to be a part of their world so badly that we destroyed our own world to get with them? And that was through manipulation, using other Blacks to manipulate.
I understand your point, but what I'm trying to argue right now is that you could have had your cake in 82. You could have had civil rights plus still do for self. Let's take back to Memphis, where when King went down there to the Poor Man March because of the garbage men strike, the garbage men in Memphis were striking because they just wanted adequate wages. Everybody didn't have a business. Some people decided to be a civil servant or work for a business or a corporation back at that time. But because the minimum wage was so low, people just couldn't survive off of those funds. And that's what King was pushing for, adequate funding livable wages at that
And
time.
we still fighting that today. It's called strike.
I agree.
It's always going to be that fight. It's always going to be that fight because they always have to have poor people in order for them to have rich people. So you're going to have a class, and it don't have to be color. It's class. It don't have to be your color. It's classism. They got a lot of white nurses on that strike line right now at UMC behind the way they treat it, not enough security, not enough pay.
There you go.
It's always
and
going to be that.
That's correct. See that now I agree with that. Why Black people reverted to not doing for self, I'm not saying 100%, but the percentage that did do that, I don't have an answer for it.
You know what? It was manipulation. Like you said, it was marketing. Once the civil rights movement cleared the way for white businesses to do business with Black people, they went after them in marketing. They marketed Coca-Cola, started having ads with Black families drinking Coca-Cola. This place started having ads to send them over there. Restaurants that they weren't allowed to go in before, since they wasn't allowed to go in there before, they wanted to go in there. They made it a point to go in there. Because it was something that was denied. Did they really care about going in there? Not before.
No.
Like I said, we didn't eat their food. We didn't dance their dance. We didn't talk they talk. We didn't walk they walk. That's like me right now going sit in a Vietnamese restaurant with nothing but Vietnamese people in there. I can't order nothing because I don't speak the language. And I'm not going to like that food because we're not used to that food. The seasonings.
Right.
So that was the same way back then. It was all about $1. They manipulated us grandly. They have a whole video that told white businesses how to get Black customers, how to sell to Black people. And that's what they did. They taught themselves that. They wrote books upon how to get us. And they used Black people to be out there the same way. Yeah, man. You know, I went and bought these shoes, man. And these shoes, bad. They nice, man. Nobody else got these shoes like I got. I got them from Rubenstein. So what you think the people want that's going to tell that he went out there and told that to? They going to want shoes from Rubenstein's too.
That's correct.
But what about Joe Brown, who y'all been buying y'all shoes from all the time? Who your granddaddy and your daddy bought their shoes from?
Yeah.
His shoes was good enough. His shoes look just like the shoes at Rubenstein.
You're right. But
it's the manipulation, and our own people do it to us.
What you're saying is true, but we will pick up back on it tomorrow if you don't mind. But just to put a bow on it, from what Divine Prince I read earlier, in Jamaica, some of the Moors was leading the charge for revolt and uprising, and then some of the Moors, as he eloquently said, start merging with the church and kind of working subvertently against the other Moors who was out in rebellion. And once again, as you said, that's a people working against their own and self-interest. But with that, I say, lest we forget. But there's two little quick announcements of dates I'd like to give out to the collective audience. August the 15th, 10 a.m., we're doing the marker reveal of the 1866 Freeman March marker, with I dub as the first civil rights march in America. If you're in the local vicinity, please come out. It's going to be on Esplanade and Dauphine Street in the back of the French Quarters. And the second date I'd like to give out is August 23rd. We're having a collective we're having a collective practitioner prayer. If you're a practitioner, you do any type of spiritual work in the New Orleans area, we calling for you guys to come out and work as a collective to do some prayers and try to change some of the energy in this country at this time. More for the information on that will be coming out, but I know it's August 23rd, and it's going to be in the Bywater area. But like I said, we'll be giving out more information. Lest we forget, the spiritual medicine of voodoo brings healing and relief from the shackles of slavery that binds the master and the slave to the same chain of social division. We're still shackled together, so we have to find a way to make this work, brothers and sisters. With that, I say ashe, ashe, ashe. Good night, everyone. We love you.
Good night, everyone. Have a nice weekend. Ashe.
Odabo.
I think the first curse that I had put on me in New Orleans by a hoodoo practitioner, St. Elias, after that working, the energy in the room was really palpable. It's really hard to get on camera. The energy that we were all feeling. And right after that, I was feeling, what on earth have I done? And I know my crew were definitely worried that something had just changed. We'd passed over a point of no return, because right after that, St. Elias offered the crew, would you like some cleansing lotion? And one of my camera ops, Sam, could not grab this bottle fast enough. And I just saw him pouring it all over himself and just rubbing it over everything. And he was just definitely did not want that negative energy on him. And I don't blame him. At the beginning of this, maybe I was more skeptical. As the days have gone on, I'm not sure what I think anymore.
I felt that maybe it wouldn't affect me if I personally didn't believe in it.
So, knowing what you know now, would you still get cursed?
I'm seeking out a curse, a hex, to put on myself.
A curse could end your life. You're literally begging the devil to knock on your door just to prove to you that God's real.
He could curse you with stupidity, but we think you got that down.
Despite the warnings, I'm investigating the real-world effects of dark magic.
Looks like you have a lot of love and a lot of opportunity. You are going to cause damage to that.
How do you feel after doing this?
Evil.
That must be quite seductive.
That's the power you're calling on. The devil, right? Quite seductive.
I'm going to enter into a pact with Satan.
Señor Satán, Lucifer, presentamos a este hermano. Con tu fuego purifica.
Wyong is pretty much the epicenter of all black magic. People are very scared to even talk about it.
Y'all better not call me at 2 o'clock in the morning talking about this man is dead. I don't want to hear that.
I have this physical feeling that something bad is coming. What have I done?
You're going to have to find faith in this in order to undo it.